Hello friends, Heidi here from Rain Country. God is good all the time, and I'm here today to talk about food powders, and I'm talking about the kind that you make yourself. So I'll be covering some on how you can make them, a little bit on how you can use them, though I do have specific videos on a lot of these various ones that I will try to link to as many as I can down below, or what I can remember, or you can do a search for by simply typing in the channel name. If you're on Rumble, it's Rain Country Homestead, all one word, or if you're on YouTube, it's just Rain Country, and then put in what it is that you're looking for. So if you're looking for the one on horseradish, you type in Rain Country or Rain Country Homestead and then put horseradish, and you should be able to pull that up. So anyway, let me just run over at least that which I have out here. I didn't pull the horseradish out, but I do have the yogurt. This is plain, and strawberry yogurt. I have cream cheese powder down here. I'm still going to do a more in-depth video on making this. Rhubarb powder, raw eggs, pumpkin, cheddar cheese, apple, zucchini. This is just another jar of raw eggs. That's from my own chickens. Right here, these three I set aside because these are ones I specifically made to use as baby food, just as add water, mix it up. But it's green beans, beef powder, and this is from beef that I canned up and then I dehydrated and turned into a powder. And then this is carrot and orange right here mixed together because Jace really liked that, though he's kind of moving on from that stage and he's on to solid foods now, of course. So this video is really more an answer to a question I get on how do I make my food powders? What do I use? Well, it really depends on how much I'm doing at a time. So if I'm just doing a small amount, like this little bit here of the strawberry yogurt, then what I do is I just use a coffee grinder that I have that is specifically for making food powders. I have another one just like this for grinding coffee beans, though anymore I use my blender because I just do a whole bunch at a time. And I will go ahead and link to this down below. And the thing I like about this particular one is that this part comes out to make it easy to clean that up. Not the one I had before, that little bowl didn't come out, so it was a little trickier washing it and trying to keep from getting water inside the machine. But then when I'm doing bigger amounts, like I don't have the mashed potato powder out here. That's one of the other things I didn't grab. But like these eggs, when I'm doing this, I use my blender because it's a lot easier to use a blender when you're doing larger amounts. But when I'm just want just a little bit, or I'm just experimenting, the coffee grinder is best because you can't blend up powders very well if you in a blender if you've only got a tiny bit in there. It works best when you're doing larger amounts. Now, I would assume that if you have a grain mill and you have it set on fine, that will work for anything that doesn't have a lot of fat or sugar in it. So I wouldn't recommend it for making a cheddar cheese powder or an egg powder, or even any of your, like your cream cheese, your yogurts, your whole milk, anything that naturally has a lot of fat in it. And again, anything that has sugar in it is not going to powder up really well anyway. Some will powder up decently, but I certainly wouldn't put that through a grain mill. But you might be able to get away with it with your rhubarb, your zucchini. I personally wouldn't use my grain mill for that. I try to keep that for grains only. Now back here are a few other ideas. These are not powdered. This is homemade chicken bone broth, which in this case I did not powder it up, though I usually do, because it was such a small amount anyway when I made this particular batch, and I wanted to keep it separate from my turkey bone broth. I just went ahead and just crushed it with my fingers and put it in a jar like this. Now, if it was a lot more and I wanted to condense it down so it took up less room, then I would have powdered this, and then I could actually fit this in a 1/4 pint jar if I wanted to do that. Right here are some dehydrated pinto beans, which I have experimented with, and you can powder these up and they work great that way for making more of a refried bean. And then you add whatever spices and other things you're going to put in there for that flavor. I decided I'm not going to powder up a bunch right now for that. I'm just going to probably powder it up as needed, because it's just an added step, because you can even just take the dried beans and cook them down enough and then sort of mash them. Either way, it's going to be an extra step one way or the other. So I'm just going to leave them that way. Here are some dried tomato flakes, and I never powder these up. And here's the reason why, is tomato flakes are one of the worst things for clumping when they're powdered up if you do not keep your jar vacuum sealed, which this one is not, because this is one I'm currently working through. So I don't bother vacuum sealing a lot of this stuff, because most of the stuff you're seeing out here are things that I'm working through, and I don't bother vacuum sealing when I'm working through them. But if you don't vacuum seal a tomato powder between every use, then it will turn into a brick inside your jar. And then the only way you can get it out without breaking your jar would be to add water to it and let it soak. Which, if you're going to use the whole jar for making maybe some tomato soup or sauce or something like that, that's fine. But trust me, it's pain. So yeah, I just do my tomatoes and flakes. And then here, I just have these out because I do make an apple powder, which I have right back here. And mostly I keep my apples like this, but I have an apple powder here. But as you can see, apple powder, because it is a fruit and has sugar in it, it can clump a little bit. If you don't, though, this is actually easy enough to get out and still use. You just want to make sure you break up any clumps that you have, because these aren't super sweet apples. The more sugar your fruit has in it, the more likely it's going to be to clump, or you may not be able to powder it up at all unless it's freeze dried. But I'm only talking about dehydrated stuff. I do stock up on certain fruits that we can't get here freeze dried through Mother Earth products, such as organic bananas, organic mango, and organic pineapple. And a lot of times I'll use those as powders to make pies, icings, add flavoring to different breads, and so on. But again, what I'm covering here is all dehydrated items, things I've dehydrated myself. So zucchini powder does have a tendency to do the same as the apple powder, which is funny to me, but it does stay a little bit looser and is easier to, you just got to break it up a little bit, and it's easy enough to pour. So let me just give you a few examples of how you can use some of these different things. Zucchini powder, apple powder, these are really great for adding to any kind of bread, cookie, pancakes, muffins, whatever you want, to either add flavor like the apple or to add more nutrition. So I've used both of these in making pancakes. I haven't used the zucchini powder in making like a zucchini bread, but I have added it to yeast breads and to pancakes most predominantly. Those are the two things I've used it in. It's just a way that I can replace some of the flour with something very nutritious, use up the zucchini, and again, I'm just getting more nutrients in there. And so I like doing that. I've made even hamburger buns using what I call Z powder. And I started doing that about 4 years ago, I think it was, and I have a video out on making those particular hamburger buns, by the way. So as far as powders like that, that's what I like to use them in. So anything that you're going to bake, obviously horseradish powder is something you just add water to and make basically an instant horseradish paste, or you can just add that as flavoring. Same thing with pretty much any of this stuff that you would just want to eat, like the yogurt, you can add water to it and eat it. Mostly I was experimenting with these, but it is something that, like the plain yogurt, I wanted to use as a base for making my ranch dressing. And then, you know, like the fruit yogurts especially, either one of them you can add to smoothies or anything you're wanting to get more of those benefits in, or for the flavor. Oh, and then pumpkins. Pumpkins the same as the apple and the zucchini, but you can also use this for making pie. It's the only way now that I preserve my pumpkins. I used to bake them and then make the puree and then freeze that up. But not only does that take up a lot of room in the freezer, just like a lot of things, when you freeze it, it gets watery. So I prefer now to dehydrate it. It's easy to use. I can just take out a little at a time instead of thawing out a whole big thing. I like this better. because when I want to make pumpkin cookies or pumpkin pancakes, or even on those rare occasions, even though I typically like my coffee black, no sugar, no milk of any kind, sometimes it's nice to be able to make some kind of pumpkin spice latte. So I put a little pumpkin powder in there, a few little spices, and mix it in with my coffee, and it's so good. And maybe some nut milk if I have some on hand, organic half and half, whatever it is I have. Pretty tasty. But oh yeah, and when I make the pumpkin cookies, I also add this powder to the icing. Now I do have a video out on making pumpkin cookies, but I'm pretty sure in that one I wasn't using the powder. I'll go ahead and link to it down below, but I'm not going to give you all the ratios. It's all, you can watch some of the videos I did, like the one on making the pumpkin powder. And to me, a lot of it, I just experiment. I just add a little water and add a little bit more until I get the consistency I want, and I rarely ever use measurements. So when I'm using the raw egg powder, and here's the reason why I keep it raw, because people freak out about this. It's raw, you shouldn't have them raw, because I dehydrate them at a low temperature to keep them raw. So the reason I do that is for the purpose of baking. And by the way, I don't know what silly person is thinking of eating egg powder straight out of the jar. That's not the purpose. When you go to cook with your eggs, do you cook the eggs before you add them to your pancake mix, cake mix, cookies? No, duh. They're raw when they go in there. Same thing here. It's going to work a lot better for baking if they are raw. And if I'm going to scramble them, well, I'm going to cook them anyway. So hello, those people that freak out about that, I just don't get that. The idea is to keep them raw so I can use them for as many things as I can. Obviously, the only things I can't use egg powder for are the things that you would keep in a more whole form, such as hard-boiled eggs, deviled eggs, and fried eggs, obviously. But anything where you're going to have your egg blended anyway, that's what you can use your egg powder for. So the thing that's really nice about most powders is that they're going to take out dehydrated and then powdered up. They're going to take up the least amount of room in storage, and they make for a quick, easy use for many things. Whether it be making baby food, adding to baked goods, using in soups, gravies, and sauces, whatever it is. So, for example, I kind of considered this powder because when I do the tomatoes, I puree them first, so they're already all blended up. I just flake them instead of powdering, so I don't have to vacuum seal the jar between every use. And then when I add when I'm using these to make a tomato sauce of any kind, typically it's going to be Italian, but I also use this for making chili, barbecue sauce, and so on. I just add it to the water as is, because since they were already pureed ahead of time, they're going to dissolve in the water and be just like if I'd added a powder. So making a powder would take up less space than the flakes, but again, I don't want to have to deal with it turning to a brick. Now, the other option you have for things like that, put them in smaller jars, like 1/4 pint jars, 1/2 pint jars, whatever it is, that the amount that you think you're going to use on a regular basis. So you can just open up the vacuum sealed jar and use the whole thing at once. So that would be an option if that's better for some people. So now let me talk a little bit about vacuum sealing. I'm not going to do all the demonstration. I'll put a video clip here of me vacuum sealing. I think it's nuts of some kind, maybe hazelnuts. My favorite method is using the brake bleeder pump and a vacuum sealing top. But what I'm going to do is link you down below to a video where I show quite a few different options that you can use for vacuum sealing. And that doesn't even cover them all, especially since now they have even more new things that you can get for pretty low cost, like a handheld battery operated one. I do show one in there, but it's a Food Saver brand. There's some out there that are cheaper that people say work really well. But anyway, the important thing to know about when you're vacuum sealing powders of any kind, if you look closely, you'll see something right there. What that is a piece of cloth. This is important when you're vacuum sealing, because when you are vacuum sealing, you're pulling the air out of the jar. Well, what's going to happen with your powders is they're going to want to pull up as well, and then they'll make a coating along the rim of the jar, so between the rim and the lid, and that's going to prevent a real good seal from happening. So if you're vacuum sealing powders and wondering why your jars just aren't sealing, that's why. You need to put some kind of barrier. Now I use a cotton cloth because I always have a lot of fabric scraps around here, but you can use like a paper muffin liner top. It needs to be something that air can go through. So paper or cloth is best. You can use a coffee filter, cut it to size if you need to, or even a chunk of paper towel. I've done that before too. So whatever you have on hand, whatever works for you, whatever you prefer. I use the cloth because I have it, and I can, when I open a jar, take that out, wash it up, and reuse it for another jar is what I do. So that is a very important step when it comes to powdering your foods. So just a few ideas for you to think about that will take up less space and be ready to use. And again, I don't like to powder everything, and some things just won't powder well at all. A lot of those things you can just rip it up, flake it up, whatever, when it's dried, and still have it take up just a lot less space that way. Oh, I forgot to mention is beet powder. I've made beet powder from beets that I'd grown, made beet kvass out of, then took the beets out of that, dehydrated them, and powdered them. And that's really great for adding nutrition and color to various foods. It's a great natural food coloring, or even to use in a makeup powder, whether it be an eyeshadow or rouge, or even adding to a lip balm to add color. And another great one to do that with is red cabbage. So in this picture, you'll see both the beet powder and the red cabbage powder. The beet powder has a more burgundy color, where the red cabbage has a more purpley color to it. So it's just kind of a fun way you can make your own natural food colorings out of some powdered goods. And if you grow the blue butterfly peas, it's the flowers. You can dehydrate those up and use those as a natural food coloring as well. And it obviously is going to add a blue color to your makeup, your foods, and more. And if you add any kind of acid to it, vinegar or whatever, it turns it purple. So it's kind of a fun one to play with. I actually have some blue butterfly pea powder. I tried to grow them one year, but even in the greenhouse, they did not like it here at all. If you'd like to try that, you can either look for the powder, give it a try, and then see if you can find some peas to grow. But yeah, so there's a lot of great things you can use your food powders for. All right, well, I hope you enjoyed this video and it gave you a few ideas. Please share. I know there's a ton of other things that I powder up that I'm forgetting about. Oh, like my peppers, my spicy hot peppers, the Chinese 5-color that I grow. I did forget to mention those. I find I like them best powdered up, and I can add them to anything. It's very spicy and very delicious, but I know there's more I'm still forgetting. But please put your ideas down below. Share with us what are your favorite things to powder up and how do you use them, so people can learn from you as well. And thanks for watching. Take care and God bless.